You gotta be kidding me. A presentation by Megan Rice and Meredith Karbowski. The physics behind the karate chop.
In order to explain the physics behind breaking a board with a karate chop, we need to first define force. Force is defined as something that changes the motion of an object. This is given to us by Newton and his laws. So the law that we care about with this definition of force and in this circumstance is Newton's third law. Newton's third law tells us that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. In these cases, these are defined by these diagrams. So if this dot is your hand, then there is a force of the board acting on your hand. And if this dot is the board, then the force of the hand acting on the board is equal to the force of the board acting on the hand. So by knowing this, we know that the force exerted by the hand on the block will exert this force on the hand. The reason this doesn't stop your hand and hurt it is that if you are traveling at a constant acceleration or speeding up constantly, you will break the board before the force of the board can hurt your hand. So because you're constantly speeding up, your hand is going to break the board before the board is able to exert this equal force on your hand that would cause damage. The reason people fail to break boards is because they decelerate or slow down and stop their hand before it hits the board, or that their hand just isn't heavy enough. This is because the equation of force is force equals mass times acceleration. Mass would be the mass of the hand or whatever else is being used to attempt to break the board. So, if you lower one of those values, you lower the force on the board, and the likelihood of breaking the board would also decrease. However, the force needed to break boards is different for every material, since different materials have different strengths. So the physics behind breaking a board is pretty simple, and it all has to do with Newton's third law and the definition of force.
As Meredith just explained, the reason these ninjas are able to chop through multiple layers of concrete is because of their constant acceleration. Watch as each of them falls through with their chop and never hesitates at the last minute. Notice that the better the follow through, the more layers they are able to chop through. Pay attention to how this ultimate ninja is able to power through layers upon layers of concrete. By keeping a constant acceleration throughout each stack of concrete, he is able to power through for what seems like an eternity. The problem with this girl is that she simply hesitates right before she strikes the wood board. She does not have a constant acceleration and therefore does not have a great enough force to break the board. The problem with this silly little munchkin is that he is distributing the force of his stomp throughout the entire board instead of focusing it all on one central point. By distributing the force throughout the entire board, it allows for more of the applied force to be absorbed and thus the board is much harder to break. But if all the force is concentrated to one area, it is much more difficult for the board to absorb that much force in such a small area, thus the board breaks.
Have I pumped you up enough?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Let's rock and roll. Okay. Make sure you have enough room here.
Shut up, we need silence.
You ready? Okay, here we go. So don't blink, you'll miss it, because it's fast. Now, I want to point something out to you. I love that. I want to point something out to you. Let's go back to what we talked about originally in the beginning. Okay, you have to bear in mind that when I do this, this doesn't have anything to. I've had a lot of training, but my training has basically been in the mechanics of how I move my body. That's really all it's been. It doesn't have to do with the kind of wheat germ I eat or the kind of meditation I do or anything like that, you know, none of this mystical stuff. And it's everything that we're talking about here with impulse and momentum. And at the end of the day, you know, when I do this, it comes down to nothing more than good old-fashioned physics!